Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Parenting with Goddard webinar series. Our hiatus is over, and we are back with a fantastic session here today focused on literacy. Now, before we get started, I do have a quick message for those of you who are joining us maybe for the first time. So if you like what you hear today, and I am certain that you will, I would encourage you to check out some of our previous webinars addressing a variety of topics like social emotional learning, instilling gratitude in children, fighting defiance and tantrums, kindergarten readiness, bedtime battles, body exploration, aggression, so much great content. And it is all available on our website, goddardschool.com, which is precisely where you are right now watching this webinar. Now, I also want to thank the hundreds of you who submitted questions for our experts today when you were registering for this session. Now, we're obviously not going to answer hundreds of questions today. This is not going to be a 22-hour marathon webinar, but as hopefully you'll see, we've done our best to really structure this conversation to address the vast majority of your questions and topics and themes that you wrote to us about. Now, it is March, and that means one thing. No, not basketball, literacy. March, of course, is National Reading Month, so today's discussion focused on early literacy is really a perfect fit. Before we dive in, let us just do some very quick introductions. I am Chaz Kurtz, Public Relations Manager here at Goddard, and I am honored to once again be your webinar host. Now, I am particularly excited about today's discussion because I actually have 3 children, all currently at different stages of their reading journeys. So I have a 9-year-old daughter. If you ask her, she is a reading expert. I have a 6-year-old son, a kindergartner, very much an emerging reader. And then I have a 2.5-year-old daughter who, while she's not reading yet, she loves her books. But you're not here to listen to me. So let's get to the stars of our show. Joining us once again is Dr. Lauren Loquasto, our Chief Academic Officer here at Goddard. Now, Dr. Lauren is a widely published author and lecturer with more than 2 decades of experience in early childhood education, including curriculum development, evaluation, and implementation, as well as teaching and consulting in the fields of preschool, special needs, and elementary education. It's not just Dr. Lauren today, though. We are thrilled to welcome a very special guest, the renowned children's author, Steve Metzger. Steve has written more than 70 children's books. Yes, 70, including some great books like Pluto Visits Earth, Detective Blue, and The Way I Act. Now, Steve brings an interesting perspective to this conversation today because before becoming an accomplished author, he actually spent 15 years as a classroom teacher. So really looking forward to getting his thoughts and perspective today. Welcome, Steve. We are so glad to have you. And enough of that. Let's jump right into our first question. So allow me to read this one verbatim. When should I start reading with my child? At what age do babies or toddlers start to benefit from being read to? Now, I'd love for both of you to share your thoughts on this one. Dr. Lauren, let's start with you.
Thank you, Chaz. It's a wonderful question, and the answer is it's never too early to start. In fact, research shows that babies actually respond to being read to prenatally. But don't despair if your child has already entered this world and is with you. It's important that we read with infants and toddlers. It allows them exposure to different sounds, different words, and it creates a bonding experience. And as I'm sure we'll touch upon later in the webinar, we'll talk about what do infant toddler behaviors look like when being read with, because it's quite different. But in answer to the question, it's never too early to start. Steve, I'm sure you have a lot to add to this as well. What would your response be to that question?
Well, I agree, Lauren. It's, never too early to start reading to your child. Like you said, it's a bonding experience. You're conditioning the child to get used to the sound of your voice. And, it's important to remember that literacy is more than reading and writing. Literacy is reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So when you're reading to your child, that child is actively listening. And studies have shown that children know a lot more words. They understand a lot more words before they articulate them. So it might not seem that children are really learning new words, and they might not be understanding right away, of course, at 3 months, but they could be picking up new words, even if they're not actually articulating them or speaking them. So yes, never too early.
Fantastic. Never too early. So start reading as soon as you can to those young children. So I'm going to read this next question, but this addresses a lot of questions that we received around age appropriateness. This is a question that a parent submitted. In my family, there was always a push for kids to learn as much as possible ASAP, and the belief is that kids are primed for learning, so no need to wait. Is this true? Should I encourage my 3-year-old to recognize letters and associate sounds, or is it too soon and too much? So again, I would love both of your thoughts, and Dr. Lauren, we'll start with you again.
So as a parent of 5 myself, we know that we always want to give our children the best opportunity. We know that the best opportunity often starts early. But when it comes to literacy and learning to read, there is no cheat code and there is no quick fix to helping young children acquire early literacy skills. And what I mean by that is there is a developmental sequence that children go through, an order of skill acquisition that they follow. And there's not a way to fast track or accelerate that. In fact, attempts to do so can unwittingly and unwillingly create gaps that are going to emerge later in the child's reading development. So I would say it's important to start with just really thinking about what Steve mentioned, speaking with and encouraging your child to listen and respond back, communication, building vocabulary. From there, it's about really helping young children begin to hear and isolate sounds, not necessarily sounds and words, not at first. It might be sounds from animal sounds when walking through the park. It might be hearing the tick-tock of a clock, or hearing the differences in mom's voice compared to Alexa, or a voice that they hear on the radio. Eventually, that will translate into hearing rhymes and hearing sounds and words, and then we'll pair those with letters in time, and then combinations of letters, and eventually build word acquisition. But trying to fast track and skip through those early stages are going to create gaps that is actually going to make it harder for children when they enter early elementary school and higher elementary school to compensate. So I would say don't try to accelerate early literacy. Create rich experiences, and you will actually see by doing so, you're actually creating an accelerated track, but it's the right track for children. Steve?
Yeah, I agree totally with Lauren. You just want children to pick up reading skills naturally, just as part of the whole bonding experience, the child listening to you reading. I have actually a cautionary tale about, I know a family that was really pushing their child to learn to read, and the child really wasn't ready. And now that child is not interested in books. I mean, that's really a sad situation where I feel like the child was feeling pressure, the child was feeling embarrassed, wasn't really picking up, on the reading skills that he wasn't ready for. So you don't want your child to feel like a failure at any time. You want to value what they are doing and what they are learning. And yeah, with letters, you can have magnetic letters in the house, have them play with letters. There's so many wonderful alphabet books you can read that are fun. Chicka chicka boom boom. There's also, when you are making lists or when they're seeing you reading, they start seeing how important reading is. So you're a model for kids learning to read.
And hopefully that's some reassurance for some parents out there that are maybe concerned. Are they doing enough? Do they need to be pushing harder? Clearly no, that is not your role as a parent. So I think that's some great guidance from both of you. Steve, this next question I will ask to you. And the question is, in what ways can you expect young children to engage with books? So for example, is it normal for kids to flip through the pages and make up their own stories or to make up their own language? Is this part of healthy development?
It certainly is. If your child is sitting with a book and flipping through the pages and making up their own stories, you should say, that is amazing. That is wonderful. Your child understands what a book is about. Now, we as adults take the idea of a book for granted. We know we open it, we look at the pages, we read going from left to right, top to bottom. This is all new for a child. Just the idea of how to handle a book is an exciting thing to learn. And all those little squiggly marks, that's what they are for kids. They will eventually learn that those letters, those squiggly marks are letters, and that those letters have meaning, and that there are sound letter-sound relationships coming from those letters. So yeah, I think that it's great that a child is flipping through. They are developing their imaginations, which of course you want them to do. And yeah, loving books is so important. And that is really getting them on the road to literacy.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. Dr. Lauren, we received a number of questions asking about Goddard's approach to literacy within our schools. So in short, to kind of combine a number of those questions, many parents, they really want to know how Goddard schools provide developmentally appropriate support for reading at different age levels within the school. So would love your thoughts there.
Sure. So Goddard's educational program is built on the most current research of how young children learn. And as Steve and I've mentioned already, we know that early literacy begins early, and it begins with rich vocabulary and communication back and forth bidirectionally with the child. So starting in our infant classrooms and progressing all the way through our schools, children are exposed to fiction and nonfiction books on a regular basis, as well as books that focus on different social, emotional, or friendship concepts. So children are hearing a lot of information. The pairing of fiction and nonfiction is unique to Goddard and unique to an early childhood approach, because what that allows is children to read a fictional storybook tale, but then also to get some true background knowledge on what it's based upon. For example, the child might be reading Stella Luna, a fiction book, but also Bat Loves the Night. And through that can make realistic comparisons to what I'm reading in the fiction book to what's actually occurring in the life cycle of a bat. And even young children will pick up on nuances or sometimes mistakes in a fictional tale that they can then challenge with background knowledge. So that's a huge component of our literacy approach. But there's also a strong focus on finger plays and on rhyme and on singing and on developing fine motor skills, because we understand that all of these skills progress naturally and normatively across the early childhood years, but they've got to be built and repeated. So it's a strong focus starting in infancy, progressing all the way through. Time a child gets to our 2-year-old program, we're focusing a bit more overtly on the sounds that they hear in words, and a bit more overtly on making squiggles on paper, as Steve said. And then eventually what I like to call code breaking, the idea of determining that, oh, that squiggle actually represents something, and that something it represents a sound that I hear, and that sound that I hear is in a word, and that word is represented by a picture. And eventually all of this pattern of behavior leads to what we as adults call reading, or pulling words off of a page. So it is a strong primary focus from infancy all the way through a Goddard school education.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lauren. So as I focused on all the questions that our parents submitted, I think an overarching theme is parents are eager for that actionable guidance, right? Like, what can I do? What can I do to do X, Y, Z? So I think these next few questions, I think, are going to really kind of focus on the bulk of those questions that we received. So Steve, I'm going to start with you with this one. How do you spark a love for reading in a young child and make it a fun habit? How do you get them excited and actually want to read, instead of it merely being something they have to do?
Well, I think, first of all, you could just make reading fun. Make it's an exciting experience. If you're enthusiastic as a parent about something, they'll probably be enthusiastic about it. Also, it's a warm experience. It's different than, watching television. It's sitting with your child. It's being close. You cannot separate the social, emotional aspects of reading from the cognitive development that happens at the same time. And if you want to make it more fun, try different voices when you do different characters. Make it really exciting. Yeah, I think if you exaggerate voices, if you sing rhymes while you're reading, a lot of rhyming books are so much fun. Find rhyming books. You can find silly books. Match the books to the child's interests. As the child gets older, you'll find out, do they like butterflies? Do they like trucks? Do they like whatever it is? You can find books that match your child and then bring those into your child's life. And of course, as I might have mentioned earlier, when they see you reading, they know it's an important experience. So you are the best model for reading, even if it's not even, but magazines, catalogs, books in every room. Make your home a print-rich environment. It's also called a literacy-rich environment. All of those times when they say print on the refrigerator, on lists, they are being exposed to the idea that these words, this print has meaning, and this has meaning for my parents and has meaning for me.
I love it. Make your home a print-rich environment. That's great. And, be excited, be engaged, be a model for your children, all really great guidance. I know with my own kids, if I'm excited about something, much higher likelihood that they're going to be excited about it too. And that certainly is applicable here with reading. Thank you, Steve. This next question, I'm going to direct to both of you, but Dr. Lauren, we'll start with you. How do we begin reading with children, and how do we respond maybe when they say they don't want to read or say it's too hard?
So Chaz, the preposition you used in that question is most important. We read with children, not to children. And it's important that we understand as adults, this is an interactive experience. It's not about the child sitting silently as the adult pulls the words off of a page. It's meant to be a collaborative experience. So if you have a child that's reluctant to engage in that, think about books in a different way. Perhaps the child is far more interested in building with blocks. Great, then have them build with blocks and have books in the area. And as the child talks about, what should I build next? I want to build a castle. Say, I want to build a castle too. I'm going to look in this book and see if I can find a good picture of a castle. That might give me an idea. Begin to show the child that the book can be used as a tool as part of their other play. Also consider opportunities to expose children to a variety of prints. Steve made a great comment there. Even as you're going about everyday routines, when you pass the Starbucks logo or the Target icon, and you ask the child, what does that say? Or can you read that sign? The child at a very early age can probably recognize, I know my sons could, the Starbucks logo. And when you acknowledge your child as a reader, they feel successful. Same thing can be done with books. For a child that's reluctant or doesn't want to read, say, well, can you read the pictures to me? And the child can then do exactly yes in a prior question, flip the pages and begin making up their own story by pulling content from the pictures that they're seeing, and then acknowledge your child's reading. Because again, the ability to interpret information from a picture and make sense of it is a literacy skill. So a lot of times it's challenging how we as adults think about reading, and making it more of an interactive and fun experience for the child.
Great. Steve, anything else to add? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Well, Lauren's answer was so extensive and wonderful. Yes. Just a couple of things. Yeah, if the child is a little resistant at the time, basically go with the flow. If the child is exhibiting, a lot of energy and not wanting to sit still for a book, it's great. Okay, you have so much energy. Let's pound some Play-Doh, or let's build a block building, or let's maybe, we'll do some reading later, right now. But doesn't feel like the child is doing anything wrong. I remember listening to teachers sometimes in the schools where I worked at, and they would talk about, let's say chiefly boys, having lots of energy, it's hard to control them. And it was almost like there was something wrong, but there's nothing wrong. Lots of girls have lots of energy too, but a lot of the complaints were about boys, and it's like you take that energy and you channel it into something else. And you don't want children to feel bad for acting exactly the way they are developmentally, built to act. So I would just like to throw that in, and also if they're not interested in a book, maybe that's, too many words on that page. They might be interested in books that only have a few words on the page, and the topic might not be interesting for them. So it's an ongoing experience that evolves over time. And, you go from cloth books to bath books to board books, and the child is an equal partner in this journey of, reading and loving books. And when I go to schools and I ask, do you love books? You always hear the kids say, yay, we love books. And that's, heartwarming to hear when I'm on these school visits. So that's really what you want, is if you have your child loving books, you are more than halfway there toward literacy. And every child will learn to read. It's not a sprint. It's a long marathon. Some will get it earlier than others. It's not a competition. So I guess the biggest advice is relax, enjoy your child, keep reading, and keep enjoying whatever stage of development your child is at.
I love that, Steve. Don't stress. Don't stress about it. They'll get there at their own pace. Dr. Lauren, I'm going to come back to you for this next one, which was a question about the development of reading and writing skills and how they interact and overlap. The parent was wondering if there is an order of operations with reading and writing. Should they be prioritizing one over the other, or is there some natural progression there? Would love your expertise on this one.
So the two do develop in similar patterns, but not necessarily in the same order. So in terms of prioritization, the short answer is no. Continue reading with your child and encourage your child to make marks on paper. What you'll naturally begin to see is as children begin to, what I like to call code break, begin to make a connection between perhaps the letters in their name. So the fact that I recognize that I always see the same squiggle at the beginning of Lauren's name, and that's my name, and oh, that's an L. You'll see that as children begin to make those code breaking or those concept masteries, they will then begin to mimic it or try to mimic it in writing. So the two actually reinforce each other. A child's stage in writing does actually give a lot of indication of where they are in reading acquisition, but don't prioritize one over the other. Allow the child to explore in both ways. I also highly encourage parents as they're reading with children to fold paper in half and give child a blank book and encourage them to write their own story. And yes, for your toddler, it might be squiggles and dots and dashes, but then have them read it to you. And you'll probably be quite surprised to have the child turn the page and say, there's daddy, next page, that's a dog, next page, and begin to tell you their story of their writing and then acknowledge their reading of their writing. In other words, use the two to reinforce each other.
Well, Lauren, I wish we had had this conversation maybe my 9-year-old was maybe 2, because I've never heard that before, that blank book approach. So that's fantastic. I'm going to try that out with my 2.5-year-old this weekend. She will love that. So that's a great piece of actionable guidance there.
Chaz, can I add something to that, please?
Of course, Steve, of course.
Yeah, I thought what Lauren said was so excellent. And the one thing about storytelling, I think, which goes into writing, is that parents, you're natural storytellers. You have so many family stories. Tell your stories to your young children and encourage them not only to do the scribbling and, their initial not pretend writing, but that's their writing. But also you might want to sit down and start dictating, have them tell you their stories, and then you write them down and then you can read them back later. So there's many ways of making their own books. I love Lauren's way, giving them the blank piece of paper, but also writing down their words and reading it back to them. And then those words are interesting and important to them, so they might want to start reading their words back to you. That was a big approach in the 70s called the language experience approach, which has now gone out of favor because of phonics has taken over. And phonics definitely has an important place in learning how to read. But I love still the language experience approach of having children read back their own words or you reading it to them. They are writers and they can see it in many different ways.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. And we'll stick with you for this next question. You touched on this earlier, but I want to see if there's anything you want to say here to elaborate on it. The question is from a parent wondering how they can help their children develop an interest in actually reading, or the way they framed it, as opposed to maybe only looking at the pictures in the book, or if this is something they should be actively doing, or if they should just allow the children to progress at their own pace. And if pictures are what they want to do in terms of their book engagement, let them do that. So would love your thoughts there if you have anything to elaborate on. Yeah,
I think we all know the answer to that now is that, yes, let kids proceed at their own pace. And yes, if they're looking at pictures and making up stories from the pictures, that's wonderful. That's exciting. That's what you want, and their understanding about what these pictures mean in the sense of the story is important. And we all know that decoding, breaking down words and learning to sound out words is important, but comprehension is words. We don't want children, when they are breaking the code and reading just to be reading the words and not knowing what they're reading. So anything that leads into comprehension and understanding what they're reading, boy, that's another place you want to get kids going to. So yes, anytime kids are telling their stories and showing that they understand what's going on, terrific.
Love it. Thank you. And we're going to go back to Dr. Lauren, I think, for this next one. Dr. Lauren, I will read this one verbatim and would love your thoughts. So, our toddler often only wants to read their book and their book only. They have shown no interest in exploring new books. How do I get them to branch out?
So we as human beings are creatures of habit. It's the same reason why we tend to eat the same things for breakfast, and many of us as adults tend to read the same authors. We develop preferences, and that's okay. What that toddler is showing you is that it's familiar, and familiarity is comforting. Allow that toddler to read and reread that book as many times as he or she wishes. And as they begin to show interest in other things, maybe present their beloved book with another book alongside it. Think to yourself as an adult, what are the things to be drawing your toddler? It might be faces. We know that infants and toddlers love to look at human faces in books. Maybe they're really looking intently at the faces in their beloved book. Oh, okay, are there other books that have similar features? Again, don't force it, but put it in proximity to their favorite book and see if it captures their interest or not. But trust me, eventually your toddler will put down the one beloved book or it will fall apart, and there'll be opportunities to expose them to other titles, but allow them to really build that familiarity and find that comfort in that book because it's reassuring to them, no different than we as adults do in other ways.
Fantastic. And I can say from experience, my daughter, my eldest daughter, when she was about 2, I think we read Goodnight Moon every single day for about 18 months. And I was wondering if this was just going to be it, but she eventually decided that Goodnight Moon, there was, as great as that was, there was more out there, and she expanded her interest. So yes, for any of you parents out there who are going through what I went through, they'll eventually branch out. Sometimes they just have to do that at their own pace. All right, Steve, for older preschoolers,
Yes.
how much should we as parents read to them versus encouraging them to read themselves? So what do you say if that preschooler is always wanting to listen to a book from their parent versus reading themselves?
Yeah, of course, I think it's perfectly fine for children to continue asking to be read to. That's such a warm parent-child, relationship type thing. And it really should go on even when kids know how to read. You should still continue reading to your child all the way up to whenever, 9, 10, 11, 12. Kids and parents reading together, or a parent reading to a child, is just a wonderful experience. And the books, of course, will change, but the involvement should continue. And one other thing about reading the same book that I wanted to add is also, when they read the same book over and over again, as Lauren said, it's great, and that's habit forming. And it's also leads to predictable text, because this is an important part of reading, that children will be able to predict what those words are and associate the word with what they're saying out loud, because they've said it over and over and over again. So that's an important part of reading, is reading the same book over and over again. So, and when children are reading on their own a little bit more, yeah, they can graduate into beginning readers, like the HarperCollins series, the I Can Read books, or the Random House, the Step Into Reading books. So there's all kinds of books at every level that children can grow into. And if you're not sure yourself, you can go ask your child's Goddard teacher, or you can ask the school librarian, or you can go into a bookstore and find out what are the kinds of books. This is, what my child is reading at or not reading at. What do you recommend? And those people will be sure to, guide you along.
Fantastic. Steve, I'll stick with you for this next question. We all know parents are extremely busy. This next question also, I will say, I did not submit this one myself, but I certainly could have. So here's what the parent shared. We have a very busy household with multiple children. what practical advice do you have for intentionally setting time aside for reading every day? Do you recommend consistent routines?
Sure, consistent routines are the best because then the child, speaking of predictability, child will be able to predict this is going to be reading time. And so they can gear, you know, their activities, their behavior toward that time. Now, if there's multiple ages and the age span is very wide, you might have to do a little divide and conquering and not read the same book to all three different ages. But if two of them are close together, you might be able to do two, reading to two children at one time and then the other child later. But yes, consistency is great. And of course, bedtime is always the best, one of the best times to read a book with your child, a time when the energy is getting low and they're able to concentrate more. And so, yes, of course, consistency is a very important part of having your child have productive, enjoyable reading experiences with you.
Fantastic. So parents out there, establish those routines, stick to them, and be consistent.
Yeah, one other thing, Chaz, is that I know in certain schools they do something called DEAR, which stands for drop everything and read. So in the course of a day, whenever, you know, preschoolers are doing all sorts of things, the teacher says, okay, it's DEAR time, drop everything and read. They stop what they're doing and it's time for them to look at a book. So that's another way maybe parents can try that in their homes, make a specific time of the day for their drop everything and read time and see if that works. If it does, okay. If it doesn't, you've tried it.
DEAR, I'd never heard that before, but I love that. That's a great one, Steve. Dr. Lauren, let's come back to you. We received many questions about bilingual reading, and I think all those questions can broadly be placed into two kind of primary categories. So I'll read a couple of questions here, so bear with me. So number one is, do you have tips for bilingual parents when the family speaks a different language at home and English at school? So the parent was wondering, should we read native language books along with English books? And then the second part is, what is the best way to introduce a second language for native English speakers via books? So that's a bunch. So over to you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for families that speak more than one language in the home, don't lose that. That's actually very important and very beneficial for your developing reader, not just for passing on social, emotional, and cultural traditions and norms and your family's history, but also from a literacy perspective. I mentioned earlier, the more words a child knows and hears, the more sounds your child knows and hears. When you're speaking English and Farsi or English and Spanish, and child's hearing multiple languages and multiple iterations of sounds, you're actually in some very beneficial ways accelerating their literacy by strengthening what's called phonological awareness, the ability to hear sounds. Having a second language exposes the child to more sounds. So how do you encourage that through books? Again, it goes back to reading with children. If there was a different language than English spoken in the home, absolutely encourage both through books. Encourage and continue to use books as a powerful tool for reinforcing that language or for introducing a second or possibly even third language to the child. But consider how it's done. Again, it's not reading to children. It's not just having them hear the language, it's having a conversation. So I might be reading a book about a dog and I might actually pause and say to a child, in our language, we'd also say whatever the word is for dog. There's two different ways to say it. You might say dog in English, or you might say gato in Spanish. It's two different ways to say the same thing. Have a conversation to help build familiarity. And as the child comes to understand that, continue to build additional language into it. But absolutely encourage multilingual exposure for children who are hearing multiple languages, or for families who want to introduce second languages.
Great. So I think that's a theme we're starting to hear through this, is read with being the operative word, with your children. And, it's an interactive and engaging opportunity. It's not just you reading to them, but use that opportunity to have that two-way dialogue while you're reading. I love it. Steve, I'm going to come back to you for this next one. We had a number of parents curious about the best ways or best practices for supplementing or extending literacy skills that are learned in the classroom to the home environment.
Yeah, and one thing I really want to get to, and I'm glad I have the opportunity at this point, is to talk about nursery rhymes. Nursery rhymes are incredibly important in learning how to read. There have been studies that show that children who have learned 8 nursery rhymes by the age of 5 will be top readers in 3rd grade. That sounds pretty crazy, but I've seen it more than once. And you can understand why. Nursery rhymes, they're like mini little stories. They play a lot with phonological awareness and rhyming. I've read also rhyming is reading. It's important for kids to be rhyming with you, singing songs with you, chanting with you. There's these songs, Willoughby Wallaby Woo, the elephant sat on you. That's a fun phonological song. Miss Mary Mac, Mac, Mac. All these kinds of songs that some of you know these songs are really important in helping child develop that phonological awareness and really helping learn how to read. But nursery rhymes, for some reason, I mean, some of them are a little strange, but I mean, Little Miss Muffet is wonderful. And you can even have a discussion after that. Where do you think Miss Muffet went? Why is she missing? Humpty Dumpty, everyone knows Humpty Dumpty, but those rhymes, for some reason, really connect with kids, and also they are important in becoming good readers later on. So, and they're enjoyable. So just one other thing to do. So, yeah, I would say keep reading. You know, earlier Lauren mentioned going outside in walks and looking at the Target signs. Yes, there's signs all over the place. I was in a hardware store the other day and I saw on the door it said push, and then the other side said pull. Well, if you're with a preschooler, you know, there's a lesson right there. Oh, look at that. Right on the door, it says push on one side and pull on the other. Hey, those are opposites, and they both start with P. Can you think of other words that start with the P sound? I mean, you can do a lot of fun games. Play I Spy, read the I Spy books. Visual discrimination, very important in learning, kids learning how to discriminate letters. Any kinds of visual discrimination games are fun. So I would say, and one thing I have to also add, when I'm on the street, sometimes I see parents and their kids are in strollers. Parents are on their phone a lot. And I want to say, you know what? You're missing an opportunity to do some fun connecting activities with your child. And maybe the phone can wait till possibly later. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there for parents to, that's a supplemental activity. Be engaged with your child as much as possible throughout the day and listening to your child and really hearing what they have to say.
Love that, Steve. And I think maybe that's something that parents, I know I'm guilty of myself, sometimes forget about, right? Is reading isn't just sitting there with the book at reading time. There are opportunities to read and learn all day, every day, no matter where we are. And, you know, to your point, being an engaged parent and not a parent who is distracted. And the phone is awfully distracting to have in your hand at all times. But I think that's just a great reminder of the fact that we can take those early literacy skills and help develop them all day long, not just for that, 30 minutes where we're sitting reading to the children. So that was great guidance. I'm gonna kind of close this little section with a 2-parter for each of you. I'm gonna start with you, Dr. Lawrence. So parents were wondering the most common mistake that they make when helping a child learn to read. And then also, what is the single best way they can enhance their child's early literacy skills? So kind of a 2-parter there. Mistakes that parents make that we hope they avoid, and then the single best way they can enhance their child's early literacy skills. So again, Lauren, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I use the word mistake lightly because I think as parents, we all have good intentions. And I think that what I'm about to say, no harm, no foul, you're not causing harm to your child, but there's a better way. I'd say that the biggest mistake is assuming that when a child is pulling words off a page that they're able to read. I recall distinctly when one of my children was about 2.5 or 3, and he was able to flip to a page and recite the words on the appropriate page. Luckily, I know that's not reading, but I think for some parents, when children do that, we assume they know it. They've mastered this, and we jump ahead. It's called word calling. Young children actually can memorize words and memorize text quite well. And oftentimes, as parents, we assume once they do that, they're readers. And therefore, I no longer need to encourage vocabulary, phonological awareness, phonics, sounding out words, etc. And that's a mistake because the time the child reaches first or second grade, it will be identified, and the child is likely at that point behind where they should be in terms of literacy development. What is the single best way to encourage literacy? I would say listen very closely to what your child says and positively reinforce when you hear new vocabulary. I remember my oldest son used the word peculiar. And I remember pausing and saying, Braden, that is a great word. Where did you hear the word peculiar? What does that mean? And I hyper focused on this word that the child used. What that does is encourage children to actually seek out new words to add to their vocabulary, makes them listen to words that they're hearing, take careful note of them, and then attempt to replicate them. Whether they use them appropriately or not is neither here nor there. It's an important skill to do with a young child, but all the way through education, to really take note of what our children are saying and reinforce when we hear strong vocabulary usage.
Great. Steve, love your thoughts.
Well, I would just go back to saying, about pressuring children and not trying to feel like there's something wrong if they're not reading actual decoding when you want them to read. Accept, validate what they're doing, encourage them to just read with you, look at books, play games, just, accept them for what they are and try not to compare your child with other children. It's sort of it's a losing game. Just try to appreciate and validate what your child is doing. And you don't want them to feel, diminished in any way by what they're doing in a very age-appropriate, normal developmental stage of their lives.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to transition to our final kind of section here with a couple of last questions. We had a lot of parents wondering about specific books, so I'm going to combine a number of these questions into one here, and then Dr. Lauren will start with you and then go to Steve. So bear with me for 1 second. So number of questions here. What are the best kinds of books at each kind of age or developmental stage? Are there books to avoid? How do you identify a good book or a bad book? And what criteria should I use when assessing the types of books for my toddler or preschooler to read? So Dr. Lauren, would love your thoughts first.
Sure. It's really important to think about the age of the child and think about what's going to capture the child's interest. So with an infant and a toddler, part of the focus is on the visual, because we know that they're not pulling the words off the page. They're looking at something visually appealing. As children progress through preschool, I tend to encourage parents to look for print that progresses left to right and top to bottom. That seems intuitive, but sometimes we see books that take a cutesy approach and break words across a page or move words in different ways. But I would say any book is a good book if it captures the child's interest. I would also encourage parents to think about both fiction and nonfiction. We know that young children enjoy both. And nonfiction gives them, again, real world background knowledge to make more comprehension or more sense of what they're reading in fictional texts. So I encourage parents to think about both.
Great. Steve?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about, let's say the bad books, but they're not really bad books, but they're not appropriate for that child at that age. I think you don't want to introduce issues that the child might not be thinking about, and you're thinking that it's an important topic, but something like death or illness or things like that, it might be time to talk about that when, unfortunately, someone in a family dies and you're looking for the best book to help your child go through that experience. But if they're not, I would not introduce books that raise questions and raise anxiety before that's needed to. So I would do that. And of course, match the book's interests to the child, listen to see what your child is excited about, and pick up the book, look at the cover. Does it look like an exciting book? Will my child like this book? Read the first few pages. Look at award winners. You can see what's won the Caldecott Medal or the Caldecott Honor books for the last few years. Those books have been validated by librarians. Some of them might have material that your child might not be interested in. Some of them might be too literary, but that's always, a good recommendation if a book has won a big award like that. And again, booksellers and librarians, they would be great resources to helping you match the right book to your child at the interest and reading level of your child.
Great guidance. Thank you both there. This next question I'm going to also address to both of you, and I love this question. So, how can I continue to foster the love of reading for an early reader? So, what are your best recommendations? Dr. Lauren, let's start with you.
Children will learn through mimicry. So parents, let your child see you read. Be a reader yourself in the home. And I know some of us say, I don't know if I have time with that between a busy work schedule and being a parent and everything else. Find time for that. Even if that's, picking up a magazine while you're checking out the grocery store. But allow children to see where reading is important to you as an adult, writing as well. I think also, make reading a time for discovery. As take a child to a bookstore or to a library and allow them to grab books that interest them and talk about that and explore that. I think it's really important that we see books as an ongoing tool for our own learning as adults, and we need to model that for our children.
Love it. And my kids, I will say, love the library. It's one of their favorite places to go. So it's great to hear that. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Okay, well, I think Lauren basically covered it all, I think, with her great answer there. But I also just, reiterate, just keep reading, keep loving what you're reading, keep loving that parent-child experience. Oh, look at that picture on page so-and-so, and take a fiction book. And like Lauren said earlier, connect it with a nonfiction book. Just be attuned to what's going on in the child and all the possibilities. There's so many books out there, and there's so many, they will match so many different interests of your child. And there's definitely lots of resources to find those books, and look for those great authors that people have loved over the years. For me, Leo Leone or Eric Carle, Jan Brett, Lois Ehlert, those, but there's new ones, Mo Willems, all kinds of wonderful authors, Faith Ringgold, there's just so many of them. And once you start reading one book from that author, you can read another one and say, oh, look, it's the same character. You can do some comparing and contrasting. This book has alligators too, but they're doing something different in this book. So make it, an alive experience for you and your child. Just keep reading and enjoying it.
Keep reading, keep enjoying it. I love it. And Steve, you started naming some of the great children's authors there, which I think is a great segue to the final question I have for both of you. And this is a two-parter. And I've had a lot of favorite questions here, but I think this is truly my number one top favorite. What was your favorite children's book when you were a child? And what was your favorite children's book to read to your own children when they were young? So Steve, let's start with you, and then Dr. Lauren will come to you to close.
Okay, well, this is a great way to end. So I had to go back, to my childhood, and I do remember that my favorite book, and of course, it was my favorite book because it was such a great book, and it's my favorite book because I have memories of reading it with my mom. And you know what? You can't replace, or you can't negate how wonderful the memory of reading with a loved person is, so that makes it extra special. It's called The Red Carpet, and I know it's out of print, and I know that I can show the cover because the publisher, it was printed by the Trumpet Book Clubs, and they're no longer in existence. So I will, can you see that okay?
We can see it, yep.
Okay.
The Red Carpet. The
Red Carpet, and it's a rhyming book. And I know why I loved it at 4 years old. It's all about the Duke of Seville is coming to town, and they roll out the red carpet, and the carpet keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. And wow, that blew my 4-year-old mind. It was just like this amazing fantasy. And just to see where the carpet is going and how could this carpet be doing all those things. So that was exciting for me. And the favorite book that I remember that my daughter liked, of course, Corduroy. All kids love Corduroy. And Make Way for Ducklings, those kind of classics. But she did love Little Blue and Little Yellow by Leo Leone. And I highly recommend that book plus Frederick, Alexander and the Wind-Up Toy. His books, award winners all, not all of them, but 3 of them anyway. And they're so wise and wonderful, swimmy, all about cooperation. They all have deeper messages. So my daughter loved that one. Little Blue and Little Yellow was one of her big favorites.
Fantastic. Some great choices there. Lauren, over to you.
Sure. So Steve actually mentioned one of mine. So my favorite book as a child was Make Way for Ducklings. That's the Robert McCloskey book. But I'll tell you, it's both the book and the story, but also the story behind it. My mother tells the story of how I didn't like the pictures were just sketches. And so from a young age, I would sneak colored pencils and begin to color the pictures just a little bit page by page. She was obviously not naive to what I was doing. But I'd continue to read the book over and over and over. Every time we read it, there'd be a little bit more color added to the sketch illustrations. And so I believe she still has a copy from my early childhood, which was very, very well read and well loved, but also in full color for 4 or 5-year-old style. As far as the books that I read with my own 2 children, 2 stand out for me. One is called Beach Day by Karen Rosa. Not a very commonly known book, but it was one that my oldest son took to because of the rhyming nature, and I liked it because of the vocabulary. He was a musical child, and he would actually sing it along as I would read it. I didn't hear it in the same sing-songy way that he did. So it was really fascinating to hear that and then to see how it played out. But probably my most beloved book, also a classic reading to my sons, was Velveteen Rabbit. Obviously a very lengthy book, so we didn't read it all the way through until they were much older. But kind of seeing the short version, having the conversation around it, and watching developmentally how they would begin to understand that. And I distinctly remember my, at the time, 4-year-old hugging a stuffed animal at night and leaning over and whispering to him, "You're real." Oh, still kind of gets to me 12 years later. So.
Love it. Well, some great options to add to all of our reading lists. So thank you both. And that's it. So thank you for a truly fantastic discussion today. I joked at the beginning that I didn't want us to go through hundreds of questions and make this a 22-hour session. Honestly, I think we probably could have, because there's such great content, such great questions from our registrants. So truly thank you. This was a really fantastic way to recognize and celebrate National Reading Month. And I think you gave all of us parents some great actionable guidance that we can start bringing into our own homes as we read to our children. So again, Dr. Lauren, Steve, thank you so very much. This was fantastic. And parents, please continue to check out GoddardSchool.com for the latest Parenting with Goddard resources. And as I believe you can see on the screen right now, we're coming back in May with a next webinar, and this one will be focused on nutrition. What are we calling it? We're calling it Cultivating Healthy Eating Habits While Navigating Picky Eaters. I will be there. I'll probably be sitting right here. I'll be taking notes because I have a picky eater or 2 in my house, and we'll be looking forward to that. So keep an eye out for registration details, probably coming in late April, early May. And until then, thanks for joining us and take care.